With the understanding of the definition of full employment, now let's go back to the second part of chapter 10, that is aggregate supply. Recall that aggregate supply is determined by the suppliers, that is labor, capital, and technology. And in the macroeconomic long run, all three production factors can adjust to their optimal level. Therefore, the economy will reach its potential in production. And the production level, their potential production level, the potential production level of the economy, when labor, capital, and technology are all at their optimal levels, then we are in the macroeconomic long run. In the macroeconomic short run, only labor can be adjusted. Capital and technology are fixed. Capital, technology are fixed. We talk about this in our introduction. So what is potential GDP? Potential GDP is the value of real GDP when all the economy's production factors are fully employed. That is, labor, capital, technology are all at its optimal level. Before we go on, let me ask you a question. Is it possible for the economy to produce an output level that is higher than its potential? That is it possible that the actual GDP that the economy has is higher than the potential GDP? The answer is yes. Potential GDP is not the maximum production level. It is the optimal production level. Let me give you an example. Say, for example, your potential in the weight room is to lift 100 pounds. So that's under your good condition. Say, for example, you sleep well, you eat well, you don't have any illness. So you go to the gym, your potential is to lift 100 pounds. However, today in the gym, you see some hot girls, so you try 110 pounds, and you did it. So you are lifting at the level higher than your potential. You can do that. But the problem is, you're going to hurt yourself, and tomorrow you cannot lift 100 pounds. So yes, you can lift, you can go beyond your potential. Another example. Say the potential of this farm is to produce 100 apples per day. Is it possible for this farm to produce more than 100 apples? The answer is yes. Because you can pick the apples that are supposed to be picked tomorrow, today. They are not good enough today, but because you want to pick more apples, so you pick them. So you pick 110 apples today. However, what happens tomorrow? What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow you will have fewer apples to pick. Your potential is to work 8 hours per day and produce some work. Is it possible for you to work 9 hours per day? Exceed your potential? The answer is yes. But you're going to be so tired tomorrow you cannot work 8 hours per day. So your potential is growing over time. Say, for example, when you're at 10, you can lift 20 pounds. When you're 15, you can lift 80 pounds. When you're 20, you can lift 100 pounds. So your potential keep growing over the long run. And the growth of the potential GDP is called economic growth. So from the graph, this thinner line is the potential GDP per person for the United States. And it is growing over time from 1960 to 1920 to 2010s. So it is going up and up and up and up. The increasing potential GDP is called economic growth. And we want the economy to grow, therefore we want the potential GDP to go up and up and up. The thicker line here, more fluctuating. This one is the actual real GDP we talk about in chapter 4. So you can see that actual GDP is fluctuating around the potential GDP. Sometimes it produces lower than the potential level. Sometimes the economy produces at a higher level than the potential. The fluctuation of the actual real GDP around the potential level is called the business cycle. So this is why we want to distinguish long run from short run in macroeconomics, because we want to divide the macroeconomic topics into two parts. The first part is economic growth, that is the long run growth of the economy. The second part is the short run business cycle. We want to see the fluctuation of the economy. To see the fluctuation clearer, what we can do is we can subtract potential GDP from the actual GDP. That is, suppose that potential GDP is a straight line. What we are going to do is make the straight line flat so that we can only see the fluctuation. So when we subtract potential GDP from actual real GDP, then we call that output gap. So output gap take out the potential GDP. That is why we don't see the upward trend. Okay, we take out the upward trend. We take out the potential GDP. So all we see here is the business cycle. Do you see the cycle? When output gap is lower, we are in a recession, and this is the expansion when it's going up. The economy is pretty well in the 1990s. This is the Great Recession. So this is the business cycle. You can see that very clearly. If we plot the output gap here with the unemployment rate in chapter 5.2, you can see that when the economy is doing well, unemployment rate is low. When the economy is in a recession, the employment rate is high. Therefore, unemployment rate and output gap go on an opposite direction. The higher the output gap, the lower the unemployment rate. That's pretty intuitive. We have a special definition of business cycle. National Bureau of Economic Research is the institution that is responsible for identifying the business cycle for the United States. And they define the recession as a significant decline in activities spread across the economy, and it lasts more than a few months. Visible in many statistics, including industrial production, employment, real income, wholesale retail trades. A recession begins after the economy reaches a peak. Therefore, if we have time here and then I'll put gap, the economy is in an expansion and then reach a peak and then goes down, that's a recession, and then reach a trough, and then recovery. That's another expansion. This is called the business cycle. That's another peak. This is called the business cycle. Alright, now we are ready to draw the aggregate supply curves. Remember, we have two aggregate supply curves. The first one is the long run aggregate supply curve. Remember, in the long run, all the production factors are adjusted to their optimal level, and the economy is producing at its potential level. Therefore, in the long run, the economy is produced at the potential GDP level, a specific real GDP level, no matter what the price level is, because that is the definition of economic long run. The definition of economic long run is the economy is producing at the potential GDP level. Therefore, long run aggregate supply curve is a straight line. Alright, let me ask you a question. So what do you need to draw the long run aggregate supply curve? You only need one number. If I give you one number, you can draw the long run aggregate supply curve. What number? The answer is, if I tell you the level of the potential GDP in this economy, then all you have to do is to find the potential GDP and draw a straight line up. So you only need the potential GDP to draw the long run aggregate supply curve. Now, let's draw the short run aggregate supply curve. What is the behavior of the economy in the short run? The answer is, in the short run is defined as capital and technology are fixed. Only labor can be adjusted in the short run. Okay, now we want to draw short run aggregate supply curve on the demand and supply diagram. This is real GDP and this is price level. Labor depends on price level. So different price levels, we will have different level of labor. And labor determines the output in the short run. Therefore, short run aggregate supply curve will depend on the price level. Now, why the labor depends on the price level? Donna Summer has a song. She sings, "She works hard for the money." Remember this song? It's from the 1970s. She works hard for the money. So hard for it, honey. Donna Summer is totally wrong. She doesn't work hard for the money. She should sing, she works hard for the apples. So hard for the apples. Why? Let me give you an example. Today, Donna Summer goes to work. Let's assume that she only needs to eat 1 apple per day to survive. Now she passes the apple market and finds that the price of apple is $1 each. So she goes to work, and her boss said, today if you work, I'm going to pay you $1 wage. And she thinks, okay, I earn $1, I go home, I buy an apple, I eat the apple, I survive the day. Okay, I'm going to work. The next day, she goes to work. When she passes the apple market, she sees that the price of apple is $3 each today. So price of apple increases. And when she goes to her office, her boss say, Donna, you worked so hard yesterday. Very good. Therefore, today I'm going to double your wage. That is, I'm going to pay you $2 today. Is she happy? Is Donna Summer happy? Is she going to work for this $2? The answer is no. She is not going to work, because if she works, she earns $2, and when she goes home, she buy an apple. No, she cannot buy an apple because the price of apple is $3 now. Therefore, she cannot buy an apple. Therefore, she cannot survive the day. Therefore, she doesn't work hard for money. The money wage doubles. That won't make her happy. She works hard for the apples. The reason why she's working is to buy an apple so that she can survive the day. Therefore, labor depends on real wage, depends on the apples. Remember the definition of real in macroeconomics? Real is nominal divided by price level. Right? So real wage is nominal wage divided by price level. What is nominal wage? Nominal wage is the dollar wage. Goes from $1 to $2 for Donna Summer. What is the real wage? Real wage is the apples. Real wage is the apples. When price of apple is $1, the real wage is 1 apple. But when the price of apple is $3, the real wage is only 2/3 of the apple. So real wage goes down, she's not going to work. Therefore, labor hour depends on real wage, not the nominal wage. Therefore, short-run aggregate supply curve depends on the price level. When price level is higher, real wage is lower, right? When the denominator increases, this number decreases. When the price level increases, real wage decreases if nominal wage doesn't change. Then, it's cheaper in real term for the producers, for the firms to hire people. That is, the production cost decreases. Therefore, when the price level is higher, the producers are going to produce more. When the price is lower, the producer is going to produce less. Let me say it again. When price level is higher, real wage goes down, the production cost for firms goes down, therefore they are willing to produce more, therefore Shorang aggregate supply curve is upward sloping, just like the regular supply curve that we learned in chapter 3. Now, we have drawn the long run aggregate supply curve, which is a straight line upward, and the Shorang aggregate supply curve, which is upward sloping. Alright, after we draw the supply curves, what's the next question that we want to ask? What causes a movement and what causes a shift? Right? Did you see that? We are doing chapter 3 again and again and again for the rest of the semester. That's why we review chapter 3. So, what's the answer? What causes a movement along the supply curves? The answer is only one thing. That is a change in the variable on the y-axis. Right? That will cause a movement along the supply curve. However, remember, the supply curves in macroeconomics is special. They're special because we have two supply curves. We have two supply curves. Therefore, when price level changes, is it going to move along the long run aggregate supply curve or along the short run aggregate supply curve? You cannot move along the long run aggregate supply curve and short run aggregate supply curve at the same time. Therefore, the movement along the aggregate supply curves are special. You have to consider two situations. For one, it's a movement along the long run aggregate supply curve. For the other, it's a movement along the short run aggregate supply curve. So what are they? A change in price level that will cause a movement without a doubt. But if at the same time money wage doesn't change, remember, real wage is nominal wage divided by price level. Therefore, if price level increases, nominal wage doesn't change, real wage goes down. Does that sound familiar to you? Yes, that's exactly what we did a few minutes ago to draw the short run aggregate supply curve, right? Therefore, if price level changes and nominal wage doesn't change, it will be a movement along the short run aggregate supply curve. Short run aggregate supply curve. So another situation is if price level changes and nominal wage change proportionally. Let me write this again. Real wage is nominal wage divided by price level. When price level increases and nominal wage increases proportionally, the result is real wage will not change. if real wage does not change, Donna Summer can buy 1 apple, no matter what the price level and nominal wage is. As long as she can buy an apple, real wage doesn't change, she's going to work 8 hours per day. That is, she is going to produce the potential GDP. Therefore, it's a movement along the long-run aggregate supply curve. Let me do it again. When price level changes, we have to consider 2 situations. Number 1, nominal wage doesn't change. Then it's a movement along the short-run aggregate supply curve. If nominal wage changes proportionally, then it's a movement along the long-run aggregate supply curve. Therefore, again, only one thing will cause a movement along the curves, that is, a change in the variable on the y-axis. But for aggregate supply curves, we have to consider 2 situations. The first one, nominal wage doesn't change. The second one, nominal wage changes. If nominal wage doesn't change, when price changes, it's a movement along the short-run aggregate supply curve. If nominal wage change proportionally to the change in price level, it will be a movement along the long-run aggregate supply curve. Alright, what causes a shift? What causes a shift in the aggregate supply curves? The answer is anything else. Anything else that changes the supplier's behaviors will cause a shift in the supply curves. And remember, we distinguish the supplier's behaviors into long run and short run in macroeconomics. Therefore, we want to discuss the shift in aggregate supply curves into 2 parts. First, what causes a shift in the long run aggregate supply curve? Second, what causes a shift of the short run aggregate supply curves? What causes a shift in the long run aggregate supply curves? This is easy. Why? Remember, you only need one number to draw the long run aggregate supply curve. Which number? Potential GDP. If I give you the potential GDP of the economy, you just draw a straight up line, then you get the long run aggregate supply curve. Therefore, how can you shift the long run aggregate supply curve? The answer is change the potential GDP level. Change the potential GDP level. And what determines the potential GDP? The answer is, in the long run, labor, capital, and technology are adjusted to their optimal level. That is the definition of potential GDP. Therefore, if you want to change the potential GDP, that is, if you want to shift the long-run aggregate supply curve, then you have to change the optimal level of labor. You have to change the optimal level of capital or optimal level of technology. Therefore, increase the full employment, increase the level of capital, and advance in technology. These will shift long-run aggregate supply curve to the right. And we call this economic growth. Right? Long-run growth. Therefore, if you want the economy to grow over time, what do you have to do? Improve labor, capital, and technology. That is the only way for an economy to grow. One thing you have to keep in mind, when potential GDP changes, both the long-run aggregate supply curve and short-run aggregate supply curve will shift. That is, when labor increases or capital increases or technology increases, long-run aggregate supply curve shift to the right. But at the same time, short-run aggregate supply curve will shift to the right by the same amount. Why? Think about this. When you're 10, you can lift 50 pounds, right? That's your potential. But sometimes you lift 49 pounds. Sometimes you lift 47 pounds. Sometimes you lift 52 pounds. So your actual lifting weight fluctuates around your potential 50 pounds. But when you're 20, you can lift 100 pounds. So your potential increases. Then your short-run fluctuation is not 49, 51, 47, 52 anymore. Your fluctuation is around 100. Sometimes you lift 102 pounds. Sometimes you lift 90 pounds. That is why when your potential increases, your short-run fluctuation also increases. Let me say it again. When labor, capital, technology advance, both long-run aggregate supply curve and short-run aggregate supply curve will shift. Next, we want to see the factors that shift the short-run aggregate supply curves. All right, we have learned three. Which three? Labor, capital, technology. Labor, capital, technology will shift both long-run aggregate supply curve and the short-run aggregate supply curve. Now, what are the other factors that shift the short-run aggregate supply curve? Those factors do not shift the long-run aggregate supply curve. In this class, let's keep it simple. We only have two examples. The first one is nominal wage. The second one is oil price. In general, these two are the production cost. This is the labor production cost. This is the material production cost. That is, anything that changes the production cost will shift the short-run aggregate supply curve, but not the long-run aggregate supply curve. And in this class, we keep it simple. We only have two examples. So whenever you see these two examples, remember, shift the short-run aggregate supply curve. That is, whenever you see nominal wage or money wage or oil price, 90% of the time, you shift the short-run aggregate supply curve first. So when nominal wage increases, production cost is higher. If the price doesn't change and it's more expensive for the suppliers to produce, then they are going to produce less. So when oil price increases, the material price increases. At any given price, the producers are going to produce less because it's more expensive to produce now. Therefore, you get a dot on the left-hand side of aggregate supply curve. Therefore, short-run aggregate supply curve shift to the left. And this will only be a short-run phenomenon. It will not shift the long-run aggregate supply curve because the only thing that can shift the long-run aggregate supply curve is the only things are LKT. Alright, now we have draw the aggregate demand curve and the aggregate supply curves. And we have studied the movement and the shift. Now it's time to put those curves together and find the equilibrium.